unmute and start video. And there we go. All ready for you.
Cool. And we're live right now?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, wait, maybe I'll move this. I don't know how live streaming works. But hello and welcome to Replies, Officers Cup style, a development seminar that I will be presenting today for the last day of the first half of semester 2 and the last development session before was the last Officers Cup themed development session in our Officers Cup series. This presentation is going to cover 4 things. Firstly, we're going to do replies, the basics, the do's and don'ts, what you need to do in your reply, and what you need to cover, and the things that you probably just shouldn't do. It won't be helpful. Secondly, on neg replies, what makes them so special, and some unique tips for negating. Then thirdly, on F replies, what makes them so special, unique tips for if you're F. And lastly, we'll have some time for questions at the end. But if you want to ask questions throughout, that's also cool and fine. It won't last the whole hour because replies are the shortest speech, almost ever. Cool. Replies, the basics. For those of you who don't know much about officers, replies is the last speech that happens in the debate. So after everyone's given all their substantive speeches, first and second F and neg have all gone, that's when it's time for battle of the replies, to fight it out, to see who is able to win the debate at the end of the day. But to cover the most important question first, why is this presentation lizard themed? Because obviously I think people would be like, what a weird theme to pick, Aisha. I didn't know you were really into lizards. Not really, but I think lizards perfectly are the perfect emblem for what replies stand for. Lizards have eyes on either side of their head, like the broad view of the debate that you need. You can't just be focused on what your team is trying to prove and everything that you want to do. You also need to think about what the other team is doing as well and include that in your reply. It needs to try to weigh up both teams and explain why your path is better. Lizards have forked tongues, like the many different paths to victory that you're going to provide in your replies once you learn how to do them the way that I do them. Tail, because the tail is at the end of the lizard's body, like you're the last speaker of your team. And skin, because chameleons are a type of lizard and chameleons change their skin. And that's exactly what a reply does. It's not very cool to just re-give your first speech over again, as much as you'll probably attach your first speech and think you could give it better now that you've had half an hour of the debate to think about it. But you need to make sure that you include the whole debate. You need to make sure you adapt, and it's not just telling the judge how cool your first speech was. Cool. The main characteristics of a reply then are twofold. Firstly, it's really important to speak in past tense. That means that you can't add any new material and just say it in past tense, but you need to refer to things that have already happened in the debate, explain how they played out and how they play out in your favor. You can't add new material at reply, and I think that's something a lot of speakers struggle with, is that you have all these cool ideas about responses you could say or new impacting that you could add, but that's not really something that you can do in replies. Replies is all about talking about what's already happened in the debate and explaining them, and using past tense is an important part of that to show that you're only talking about stuff that has happened and you're not adding new material. The second thing is that the reply is supposed to give a path to victory. The goal of a reply is to make your side seem like the reasonable one, the obvious winners of the debate, or even if it's not obvious, it's clear, even if it's close, that, even if it's 0.5, that you should pick your team over the other team, and you want to make yourself seem like the most likely winner. I think the first part is quite intuitive, to just speak in past tense and not add new material. But the second part about providing a path to victory, it's a little bit harder. And that's what we're going to cover today in the basics, is how to find the path to victory, how to identify it, and how to present that in a clear, compelling way for the judge. Obviously, though, you only have 3 minutes to give an Officers Cup reply, which is not a lot of time. It's very short. And the solution to being able to fit all your path to victory stuff isn't to just speak faster, but it's to be able to be concise, to do these 3 steps that you need to do in a reply. The first thing is about an introduction. I think introductions are really important in replies, even if they take up a little bit of time. It's your first insight into the speech to give the judge a really clear idea of what you're going to do in your reply, what the clear path is, and how the points of clash are going to play out. Often, I like to write mine down in 1 to maybe 2 sentences, if I'm really pushing it, of what I think our biggest impact is, our biggest benefit, and the strategy we've taken to defeat the other side. So, for example, I think we've proved affirmative has shown you a really big harm to X group who is very vulnerable compared to the material from negating, which is largely symmetric or isn't very important because it doesn't affect a vulnerable actor, or something that has been our team strategy to try to defeat the negating team. It gives our judge a really clear idea of what you're going to do in your reply and makes it really clear when you go through the points of clash and all the material as to what you're planning on doing and how they should see, the debate at the end of the speech. The next thing is about material. And you can't just think about your material and how cool and smart all the points that you brought up are, but you have to think about what is the other team going to say in their reply, what's their path to victory, what have their team strategy been to defeat yours, and making sure that you're including that. The way I quite like to do replies when I'm starting out is to make it quite simple, to say, here's what we're trying to prove. We're trying to prove X benefit. What responses did they give to that? Why do those responses not apply? Or do we respond to their responses maybe, depending on where I'm speaking in the debate? And then, a quick sum up at the end of why that impact's really important. Then I talk about their path to victory. What are they trying to prove in their best case, making sure that we're really charitable and believing everything the other team, or not believing, sorry, but, trying to look at it in their best case light and explaining why they don't meet that up. That might be responses we've given to their material, explaining why it's not relevant in the debate or isn't important in the debate. But it also could be explaining why those mechanisms that they give don't actually reach the outcome they claim, and that, they fail to prove anything, or they prove something much smaller. All of those tools are available to you in reply, as long as you only take the material that's in the debate and re-explain it to the judge in a compelling way. So I think when thinking about material, it's important to try think about both sides, think about those paths, and try work out what you set out in your introduction is going to be achieved when you're talking about the material. But I think the most special and unique thing about replies is to do with meta and weighing, because everyone in the debate has a chance to talk about material. And at first and second, that's the most important thing you can do, as I'm sure I watched the first and second speaker seminars and they outlined to you. It's really important at first to get your case out. It's really important at second to try to respond to everything that the second speaker or that the other team has brought out. At replies, it's really important to do that weighing of deciding what is more or less important in the debate, and the meta, is that proven to the full extent, and explaining to the judge exactly what you're doing, which is, for those of you who don't know, what meta is just like guiding the judge exactly through what you're doing, making it super clear, explaining that that impact doesn't happen, or that impact is washed, or those mechanisms don't reach the impact that accrues. All of that is the meta you provide in a reply to make it really clear to a judge. I'm sure lots of you have heard about replies described as a biased adjudication, but I don't think that's the most accurate way to think about it. And if you listen to Umber's Austral Styles reply seminar, she also talks through quite clearly why that's a bad way to view debates and replies as a whole. Instead, it's about looking at both teams' best case and then worst case of what they prove, and explaining why, and no matter what outcome comes out, all of your stuff is always more important than their stuff. So, it's not just giving an adjudication, but guiding the judge in the direction you want them to think. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Otherwise, I'll flick on to the next slide. Yes, Shah.
So when you add weighing in your reply, how much is that new material, or can you make it sound like it's not new material, or is it just not new material? It's just weighing.
So I think it depends how you weigh, right? If you're like 5 reasons why, we should care more about that actor, that's probably, new material because you're giving mechanisms as to why an actor is more important than another actor. But if you say, we told you reasons why that actor was important, they told you reasons why that actor was important, and then compare those reasons together, something that might not have been done in the debate so far because people are busy and are just trying to respond to the claims and making sure that the claims aren't proved. You have the unique time at Reply to sit down, compare those sets of reasons, and explain why one is more believable than the other without adding any new material. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. But you say 3 minutes is so short, Aisha, and you just told me lots of things I have to do. I have to look at all the material of the debate, which is 24 minutes before me of substantive material and responses. And I have to do all this meta and weighing, and I only have 3 minutes to do it. I think the tip here is that being concise is very key, and rambling is your worst enemy. You're going to have a lot of material to get through. It's inevitable. I think the important thing is to try, I'm not saying write the speech word for word, but try not to ramble past the stuff that you've written on your paper. You probably write what is on your paper to prove the point, and then you're like, oh, but I'm like, I always do this. I'm like, I'm killing it. I'm smashing it. And then I just keep talking about that point because I feel like I'm doing so good on it. And then I've run out of time to talk about the rest of the material that I probably also could have done cool things with. It's really important to trust yourself, to trust that the stuff you wrote down on your paper is enough to prove the point, and make sure that you move on. A good tip for this that I'm bad at executing, but do as I say, not as I do, is to write down timestamps on your reply. Some people do points of clash style, some people do narrative style. I don't think it matters whether you decide to step through the debate logically or whether you group things thematically into clashes, as previous seminars have explained how to do clashes. I think the important thing, though, is looking at your pieces of paper and knowing that you're going to have to get through every piece of paper. Do you want to get to the last one at 5 seconds left? Probably not. Do you want to get to it at 30 seconds left? And writing down a little 230 at the top of the piece of paper and making sure you actively strive to hit it. That means that if you've rambled in a different point of clash, you're going to have to cut stuff and skip pieces of your paper to make sure you get to that last piece of paper on time, because all of the material is important, and especially if you have another reply speaker coming up after you, if you don't give any weighing, any meta, any view on how you should read that in the debate, someone else can come up after you and give uncontested not analysis, but meta about why you should care about that material so importantly, and you don't have any part of your reply to defend against that. I think it's really important to make sure that you hit everything in reply. That's why being concise is key, even though it's scary, even though it's hard. It's something to work on. Things that I do to work on my conciseness outside of timestamps is just to try flag my material quite shortly and the responses quite shortly, and spend a lot of time on meta. Judges already wrote down what every other speaker in the debate said. They already listened quite closely. So if you just say, we gave you a few reasons and one word for each of them to prove this outcome, what are the responses? And you give quite short words for their responses. That frees you up a lot of time to do the meta and the weighing that's really important in the reply, while still including all the material that the judge probably remembers if you just flag it to them because they already wrote it down. And the other speakers also in the debate will know what you're talking about because they've just spent 30 minutes thinking very intensely about this debate. That's the basics of replies, what you have to do, what you can't do, add new responses, and some tips and tricks on how to add meta and make sure that you can do it all in a very short time span. Any questions about the basics before I move on to the differences between specific stuff? And if there's no questions now, that's fine, because we can come back later at the end for my questions section. Cool. Okay. Neg replies. Neg replies are, fun. Some see them as a super powerful position and some more cool wizards. Right. An introduction to the neg block. The neg block in offices is 9 minutes of uninterrupted time where your team just gets to talk at the judge about why your arguments are so cool and so smart and so much better than the other teams. And your second speaker already gave you 6 minutes of really cool analysis about why that is. You stand up in the next 3 minutes of your uninterrupted speaking time and just like repeat your second speaker, use the same structure of points of clash as them, the same order, do the same material, but faster because it's shorter. You're not really adding anything into the debate. You're not taking the best amount of, like the best approach to utilizing that time that you have to be able to put a lot of material out there that the affirmative team is going to have to deal with. So what are some tips and tricks to not just repeat the speech that you heard come before you that you're probably like, or I'm always like when my second speaker speaks before me, I'm like, wow, that's so smart. That's definitely how we win the debate. That's the path. But you've got to have something new, something different, and something that builds on more paths for you to win the debate. More explanations is how you're able to do that. A few things to think about and tips to utilize the neg block. The first is about prioritizing. You can't just sit there and write your reply and not listen to your second speaker at all and hope that you don't, that you run different stuff to them. You need to, while you're writing, have an ear out and make sure that you're listening to the debate still and thinking about what material did my second speaker run out of time for. Maybe they got to their third point of clash at 5 minutes and they didn't have time to step through all the reasons. It's probably quite important for you then, or maybe they didn't get to it all, right? Maybe they just missed their third point of clash. It's probably quite important for you to start with that because you're always going to ramble most about the one you start with and explain why that is irrelevant or why that is not part of the debate or not important because your second speaker hasn't had time to respond to it and you're going to need to weigh it out or explain why your material is inherently more important. And it's making sure that you cover all your bases and get all that material dealt with in that 9 minutes. So picking up the holes that your second speaker left in the debate. The next tip is on tracking. My personal thoughts on when I speak neg reply is after my first neg speech, I fully track the second AF speech like I was a judge. I write down every claim they make, every response. And then while I'm writing my reply in second neg and listening to my second neg speaker say really smart things, I'm always looking at my tracking sheet and going, is there anything that they missed? Is there anything they didn't respond to that I'm going to need to integrate into my reply so that it's not important and that they can't just like bring it up at F reply? So basically the goal is to close all the doors so that they don't have any doors to open when they get to F reply and make that really important in the debate. So often that looks like a second speaker will deal with the first 2 responses someone makes to a point, but not touch on the third one. So then I explain why that response doesn't actually, target our point, why it buys into earlier analysis that we gave. So the response doesn't actually apply. Why even if it defeats our point in our best case, it's not important because it only mitigates our harms, for example, but the harm still happens. And that's more important than, the harms that we've proven don't happen on their side. So making sure I'm paying attention to the whole debate and any material that's been missed up until that point is dealt with in the reply so that there's no doors open. But lastly, it's about weighing. And I think at neg reply, it's really important to think about the material that is strongest for you, the material that's received the least responses, for example, or the material that's really impactful in the debate to the most important stakeholder, or the material that changes the world or something. Weighing is your best friend here to make sure it's really important that the AF reply has to deal with it. And that's some burden pushing you can do there to be like, this is the most important point in the debate. If AF reply doesn't have a solution to that, there's no way they can win the debate. Or this is the most important material in the debate and AF's material is never going to weigh up against it because AF reply in their 3 minutes has like 9 minutes of material to deal with. The more weighing you can do about why your stuff's really important, why it is like the deciding factor in the debate, puts more of a burden on the F reply speaker to have to do more things in their reply and their already limited amount of time to be able to overcome the amount of material that's really important that you've put out there. So overall, to use a neg block, prioritize, make sure that all material is covered in a way that's important, and make sure that it's weighed so that it's really important for the judge and really important for the AF reply speaker to climb a mountain to be able to get up over all your really cool material. Any specific questions about the neg block or anything like that? Nope. Cool.
Oh, I have one.
Yeah.
It's quick-paced format.
Yeah.
How much communication do you have with your second speaker before, after they speak about what you're going to do in your reply, since it's right after?
I think that depends heavily on team dynamics and what your second speaker likes to do. For example, I think the key thing here is you're probably not going to have your reply written out before your second speaker goes up. You're probably helping them think of responses. You're tracking the second AF speech so that you know all the material that needs to be dealt with in the debate. You're going to write your reply in the 6 minutes while your second neg speaker is speaking. So you don't really have any time to communicate with them there. Maybe your second neg is the type of person that you can ask before you go up, what's your plan in your speech? Give me like a quick overview of what you're trying to do. So you know when you're writing your reply that they're going to hit their benefit first, then re-whip your material, or they're going to whip your material to make it really important and then respond to their stuff, whatever strategy your second chooses. And so then you have an idea of what the sort of stuff they might be missing out is. The other thing is it's a very quick-paced format, and that's why teamwork and communication with your partner is really important. That's when your second speaker sits down after their speech and you go, did you miss anything? Are there pieces of paper that you need me to try, not like bring new responses out, but deal with the material that's on that piece of paper? Is there any weighing that you wrote down that you didn't deliver that I can steal for my speech because it's not new? And making sure that you don't just like ask them and then like be like, cool, and actually ignore those pieces of paper, but trust that what your teammate is saying is good and valuable material, and make sure that you can try integrate it in. It's totally fine if you take all those pieces of paper up and then you read them through quickly for 15 seconds and slot them into where you think they'll like fit in your speech. No judge is going to hate you for standing up and like quickly skimming your papers before you put them in your speech. But making sure that you communicate with your teammate about anything that they might have missed that they think is really important to be dealt with in the reply, and doing that. Also, though, if your teammate is just like talking at you and you're trying to think before you get up on stage, but like up to the speaking podium to speak, don't be scared to say, shh, I just need a moment to like get myself in the headspace. You don't have to just like listen to them ramble while you're trying to think and sort out, and get in a space where you can give it a coherent, calm, concise speech. So take what's important from them and then tell them to shh and let you think. Does that answer your question, Shah?
Yeah, I feel like personally attacked, but yes.
Yeah, well, you tend to talk a lot. Okay, cool. On AF replies then. Did I, yeah, I do have an AF reply slide after this. I was like, did I manage to get to this part of the presentation? But I did, I'm so smart. Now you're sitting there thinking and going, wow, neg seems so good. Like neg is totally OP. How am I ever going to deal with 9 minutes of material that 6 minutes of it is likely to be new responses? And I'm not allowed to bring out any new material of my own. I'm not allowed to go, well, that was new. Here's all my cool knowledge that I can dump on you and respond. It's not a third speech. You just don't get to bring up new material. That's why AF is quite hard at officers, because you have to be preemptive. You have to always take neg at their best, and you have to be prepared to have a lot of responses come out when you don't have an ability to actually properly respond to them. That's stuff that you can deal with earlier in the line. But what do you need to do specifically at reply to be able to deal with the 9 minutes of all your content? If you're facing a good neg team, all of your content being dealt with in some way, weighed out or responded to, and their stuff being quite important in the debate. And my tips to defeat the neg block are pretty similar to my tips to utilize the neg block. But that's just because I think that the way to defeat the neg block is to just reverse the neg block. thinking about prioritizing. What material did the second neg speaker bring that is new that you have to deal with in your reply, or there's no way you'll be able to win the debate? Because if you don't explain why that material is bad, or you don't explain why that material is not relevant, the judge will always buy it because it sounds so compelling when someone else says it. And that's something you have to deal with. So thinking about what new things they bring to the debate and making sure that they are in your speech quite early on so that you're able to deal with them and not ramble about them and make those really important. Tracking. Is there anything that you've said in your case and you'll know what you said in your speech and your second AF speaker will know what they said in their speech that hasn't been responded to by negating? That's a really good opportunity for you to exploit that lack of response, to say, here's something we brought you that doesn't get dealt with. Here's how it can apply to whole parts of their case and knock down maybe a whole point, for example, or knock down a whole impact that they tried to claim was really important. And that takes out a lot of the weighing that they did that told you that their point was really important. Doesn't matter if it's important, if it doesn't actually happen and you're able to prove that because that hasn't been, response hasn't been dealt with. What I usually do in terms of tracking is I take the whole 9 minutes to write my AF reply because I find AF replies have a lot of content and I need to be extra concise. So I need to really think about my word choice to be able to make sure that I'm getting through all that material. And that's why your second speaker is your best friend. They don't have anything else to do. All they can do is sit there and write down the entirety of the neg block and what happens in it, and then can tell you new things that come out, or can tell you, here's like something that they missed from my speech that you're able to exploit. And obviously that communication is still the same and really important. If they're talking at you the whole speech and you don't have any time to think, because they're like, this is a new response, this is a new response, this is a new response, you can be like, shh, just like, I'll tell you in a second when I want to talk to you. But having them there, having a sheet of paper where the whole second neg speech is down is probably quite important for you to scan over after the second neg speech is done, to be like, what looks new here? What do I need to deal with in my reply that I've missed while I've been writing? And, you're still listening at the same time, but, it's hard to listen and write perfectly. So having a scan over that, being like, what do you think are the most important new things that come out that need to be dealt with? And being able to tackle those. And especially at AF reply, I think weighing is once again your best friend, but in a different way. I don't know why it still says burden push, because it shouldn't, because there's no one to burden push on anymore because you're the last speaker in the debate. But you have the last opportunity to impress on the judge what is important, which is why AF replies are personally my favorite reply, is because no one's going to come up after you and tell people that the weighing you did was wrong. You can tell the judge what is really important, and you can do it in a way that's compelling and use your language skills and all the impacting that you've learned through Melissa's lovely development seminars on how to build a point, on Liam's prep seminar, on all of Umber and Char's seminars about how to impact those points out really well. You can reutilize that impacting in a way where you frame it to be really important. You say that really harms people, or those are vulnerable people who never get a benefit unless you implement the change that we do on AF. And actually being able to use that weighing to make that really important and stick in the judge's mind. You have a unique ability to be able to be the last thing in their head when they go to write their ballot and their adjudication. And that weighing is really important to make sure that the things you want to stick in their mind actually stick in their mind. So overall, in defeating the neg block, prioritizing, making sure that you deal with all their stuff and tracking it to make sure you don't miss anything, and weighing stuff out is important. But obviously just prioritizing and tracking their stuff isn't enough to defeat the neg block, because then you just spend 3 minutes talking about their material and you never have a path to victory for yourself. So making sure you still do those reply basics, explaining your path to victory, how the way that they say that your path to victory doesn't apply actually does apply, and then weighing that to be super duper important, super duper cool, and really, really life-changing for people. Any questions about the AF reply? Shah.
Yeah, so my question is, especially being a second speaker, is there anything that you would like your second affirming speaker to do that will make your job as AF reply much easier? And is there something that you could work on together in practice, or is it just in general tips for second AF?
So my thoughts on what I like second half to do when I'm speaking reply. Firstly, I like my second half speakers to respond to everything that comes out from neg. Neg can't bring a new substantive up as second neg. They can't, that's like illegal in the rules of officers. So making sure that they actually deal with every single claim that comes out of negating is really important, because if they don't, they get like 9 minutes to whip. That is really important. And it's probably quite hard to come back from that if they spent 9 minutes telling you something's really important and there's nothing in your case or responses that's able to deal with that. The second thing is, I think it's really important for my second F to be a team player. I think that's talking about before they go up what material hasn't been addressed that they can whip to be really important, and put like burdens on the table that take up neg Bloc's time. So, first neg doesn't have time to respond to everything because they have to get their own case out. But if they haven't responded to something that's really important from your speech, or they haven't responded to something that you can think that you could extend the impacts out on, I think as a first speaker and a reply speaker, it's really important to say, this hasn't been dealt with. You could expand this out because you can add new substantive as second F to say these impacts could also happen, adding stuff that they have to respond to, making sure you put that burden on them to take up their 9 minutes of time so that by the time it gets to your F reply, there's less things for you to deal with because they've spent a lot of time dismantling your stuff. And you've probably already got an idea about how your material works and how to overcome their responses. I think the hardest thing in F reply to do is actually to talk about parts of their material that you weren't expecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow. Officers are so strategic and fun.
It is really cool format. It's really fun. It's really fast paced. And I think it's quite hard to get around at the start. But once you get your head around it and you're on your way, once you're thinking in prep about all the parts of the debate that are going to play out and thinking about how to, overcome those so they're already in your first speech. That gives you so many tools as a reply speaker to bring back parts of your case that people have probably forgotten and whip it. But just because it was in your first speech doesn't mean that you repeat your first speech again, even if you're so good at prep that your first speech was at 80. The debates still happen. Talk about stuff your second speaker said too. They also have cool and smart contributions. Even if you didn't say them, I'm sure they still have smart ideas. Any questions? Otherwise, that's the end of my presentation. Replies are short. There's not much to say about them. Yeah, sure.
Do you think officers should have POIs?
This is so irrelevant to the development.
But it's a question.
It is a question. I feel like there was once a time where I thought that officers should have POIs. There's already so many things you have to do. There's so little time. No, I don't. Unless you expand the speaking times. Cool. Is there any way I can check Facebook to see if Facebook has any comments?
I'm checking Facebook. There are no comments.
Excellent. Wow.
Except for me being like, wow, this is so cool.
Wow, this is so cool. So basically, to conclude, those are my thoughts on how you do replies. You're welcome to come up to me at club nights and ask me if you have any questions. If you watch this later, or I guess you can Facebook message me. I'm usually better at answering questions than I am at giving seminars because I just probably forgot something that's important. And if you don't understand how something works, I'm probably much better able to explain it if you ask, and I'm always quite happy to answer questions. Other than that, I hope everyone has a lovely day, has enjoyed learning about officers and feels like they're able to master the format much better from 3 Officers Cup finalists and me. How do I go on live?